morning, everyone. I hope you're well. You've enjoyed the Mentimeter session? Yeah? Umona Promimba, what else have you seen? Fun thing have you seen? You realize we are very interesting people, right? So today, I have the honor and pleasure of introducing the panel. As you can see from the screen, we are here for the practice, challenges, and opportunities in local manufacturing of pharmaceuticals in Kenya. And we've come up, the panel has various people who can speak to this interesting panel, and I have the pleasure of introducing them. I will start with the moderator of this panel. So allow me to welcome on stage John Paul Omollo. John Paul Omollo is a public health professional and health policy analyst with vast experience in health systems strengthening and public health advocacy. Currently, he's a regional lead, R&D policy and advocacy at PATH, leading PATH's Africa advocacy work. He has served in various senior positions, both at policy and implementation level. He's an advisor to the African Union COVID-19 Commission on local pharmaceutical manufacturing, and also sits in the Kenya Local Manufacturing Task Force. He previously served on the Global Gavi CSO Steering Committee and the Global Financing Facility Civil Society Steering Committee. He holds a master's in public health. Karibu sana, John Paul. Next on stage, we'll have Dr. Beena Mahida. Welcome. Dr. Beena Mahida is a passionate industrial pharmacist with over 7 years of experience in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry in areas of product release, quality assurance, regulatory compliance, and regulatory affairs, handling the East Africa region at Cosmos Limited. She served as Executive Secretary of the Federation of Kenya Manufacturers from 2022-2023, and currently serves as the Secretary of the Technical Committee, FKM. She's also the industrial representative at the Governing Council, PSK in Nairobi branch, organizing secretary of the Regulatory Affairs Pharmacists Association of Kenya, and also industry representative of Bioequivalence Committee with PPB. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Beena Mahida, karibu on stage. On stage, we also have we'll be welcoming Dr. Milka Choge. Dr. Milka Choge joins us from USAID. She's a health financing lead of USAID. She's a dynamic senior leader driving sustainable development across Africa in innovation, evidence-based solution, and strategic private sector engagement. She's worked for stellar programs for USAID, FCDO, and the World Bank. She has managed complex multi-donor initiatives with 45+ partners and budgets up to $60 million. Dr. Choge is passionate about reducing mortality through sustainable capacity building of institutions and human capital via research partnerships and private sector engagement. She's seen firsthand how evidence improves health outcomes and remains dedicated to advancing these goals. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Milka Choge, Health Financing Lead, USAID. Last but not least, we have Dr. Stephen Njuguna, who will be joining us on stage. Dr. Njuguna joins us from the Ministry of Health. You know we cannot have this conversation if the Ministry of Health is not represented. So he joins us from the Ministry of Health. He's currently the Deputy Director of the Directorate of the Health Products and Technologies team, and he's done a lot of work towards local manufacturing. In fact, in this conference, he'll be presenting one of his papers on the work that they are doing on advancing the local manufacturing agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome Dr. Stephen Njuguna to the stage. And I have the honors now to pass the mic.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Need more energy. Good morning. No, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm not going to present, I think. Someone project. Thank you so much. I'm really privileged to be here today to join you for this really important conference, but also to be able to moderate this excellent panel. As you're aware, and I think as per the program, today we are going to discuss local manufacturing agenda. And why is this really important? And why in this really conference? It is important for us to realize that since COVID, the issue of deglobalizing the local manufacturing agenda has taken a center stage among heads of state, among member states in Africa. And there's a lot that needs to go into it. And one of the biggest piece of it is a bit on the human capital development. And I think if you look at the way the training centers have been accustomed, we are not properly prepared for the industrial piece of work that is ahead of us. The continent is currently preparing to produce more than 60% of its vaccine needs in Africa by 2040. We are doing currently slightly below 1%. What does that need? That will require a huge investment, both financial, technical, human resource, and all that goes by it, including infrastructure. So there's a lot that needs to be thought through. And I think it is an opportune time, in fact, we are very late for this conversation, to start thinking about what would it require? What do we need to put into the ecosystem to strengthen and to enable a sustainable local manufacturing agenda in Africa? As you may know, if you look at the entire spectrum of health products and technology, we are only producing 3% of our consumption in the entire continent. We are lucky that in Kenya, we are technically one of the East Africa hub for local manufacturing. But what does that mean? If you look at the system, we are also not doing end-to-end R&D and manufacturing. We are mostly doing fill and finish. So how then do we move from that point by strengthening the ecosystem, by looking at the R&D, the clinical trials, by looking at the expertise that are in place and making sure that we are capable of producing products that are fit for purpose. The ecosystem is changing. We are getting into the space of precision medicine. How are we prepared for that ecosystem? Today, I'm really honored that I have this panel that will try and unpack all these, speak to us about our level of preparedness, tell us about what needs to be done, and how all of us can add value. So we would also take this opportunity to understand how pharmacists will need to understand their pivotal role in promoting the pharmaceutical production, ensuring medical safety, and contributing to the national economy through healthcare advancement. Please, again, help me welcome the panelists with a round of applause. Thank you so much. And I'll just jump into it, and as I said, I think before she just left, she mentioned that you can't do anything before government speaks. So the government needs to open it up. And I'm glad to have Dr. Njuguna, who is representing the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies. Dr. Njuguna, we know that Kenya is playing this critical role within the space. We know the challenges that are even happening within the space. We are all now scrambling to take advantage of the opportunity. As they say, opportunities have wings, right? And if you don't take care of them, they fly away. What strategies is the Ministry of Health within the DHPT team putting in place to make sure that Kenya and all these people are suitable? Kenya is made suitable destination for local manufacturing. And of course, by extension, making sure that the team here has all the right jobs. I'll give you this.
Yeah, thank you very much, John Paul, and thank you PSK, and thank you pharmacists for having me here. I am here representing the Ministry of Health, specifically the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies, and I think that's a wonderful question. I think when I was talking to Beena just before this, Beena was telling me that actually the manufacturers are actually feeling what the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies is doing. So I'll basically talk about what are we doing as DHPT to ensure that we enhance this agenda. Number one, let me begin by saying that DHPT, Directorate of Health Products and Technologies, currently is the newest directorate at the Ministry of Health. And we have the Division of Quality Assurance and Market Shaping, which I am currently leading. And this is the division that is actually looking at matters LM, matters local manufacturing. I think this has really catapulted the agenda because before the ministry did not have that division or a department that was actually looking at matters local manufacturing. So basically the Division of Quality Assurance and Market Shaping sleeps, wakes up, eats, and does everything but focusing on LM. So that is one of the biggest things that has happened at the ministry. And if you really want to come and ask a question at the ministry level concerning LM, the division which I sit in is actually the division that will provide answers. Secondly, we are in the process of reviewing our Kenya National Pharmaceutical Policy 2012. This is a policy that will now become a HPT policy. And in this policy, again, the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies is leading the discussion. And we are going to have a new policy for HPTs focused on local content. So that is very, very important. In fact, one of the questions that came in the RC78 that will be sponsored by WHO is what is Kenya doing in terms of policy to enhance LM? So having a HPT policy that will focus on local production is one other thing that I think is going to really catapult this agenda. Number three, we had an expo in October last year. And this expo was actually officiated by His Excellency the President. And one of the things that the President said is that in the next 2 years, we need to have 50% of HPTs within the KEML, the Kenya Essential Medicines list, being produced locally. And because of that, again, DHPT came in and is actually driving the agenda. And because of that, we were able to undertake a baseline assessment. We undertook a baseline assessment of the capacities that we have specifically for pharma, which we have now completed, and a report will be coming out very soon. Now, in that report, we are going to actually tell the public what capacities Kenya has in terms of production of medicines for this country. In fact, something I could probably preempt, and I think, Beena, I think I mentioned this again, is that we have already, one of the outputs of the baseline assessment that we did, and actually every manufacturer will tell you that DHPT was able to visit all the manufacturers of pharma between January and March, is that we have been able to identify 222 products that Kenya is producing sufficiently. And because of that, again, the Ministry of Health has been able to forward that list to the Ministry of Trade. And that list basically will be published and gazetted by the Ministry of Trade. And then what we will do now is ensure that we have adherence, that for those 222 products, then institutions like KEMSA and probably MEDS, and even other private institutions, we shall try to ensure that they buy only those that are produced in this country. Probably that is a point that probably at this juncture you would actually clap for us, because I think that's a huge thing that we have done. Okay, so I don't know whether I still have time, but I can still continue. As we speak right now, since the expo that HE, the president, graced, we have what we call the PSA's roundtable meeting with local manufacturers. Every quarter, the PS is sitting with local manufacturers, all of them, and not just for pharma, diagnostics, and all the other HPTs. And we are having discussions. Now, those discussions are quite key because as we talk about the incentives, as we talk about the initiatives that the ministry should actually strengthen, we need to listen to the manufacturer themselves. So that roundtable meeting has actually been quite good. In fact, Milka, I think you once sponsored. I think you've been sponsoring the meetings. Yes, and this has actually gone a long way. So what will this, all these things bring us up to? We will be developing a strategy, an implementation strategy for locally manufactured products in this country. A 5 to 10 year strategy, we will agree. And we shall call all stakeholders so that we can come up with that strategy. And then, secondly, with that strategy, then, we shall be able to move this country to the next level. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think you can feel what the Directorate of Health Products and Technologies is doing in matters LM, and I think we are going to even be felt more. Thank you. Thank you, John Paul.
Thank you so much. Looks like the Directorate is quite busy. Yep, please go ahead. Go ahead, go ahead. The Directorate seems to be very busy, right? And we really appreciate that being the youngest Directorate, there's a lot that you've already put towards strengthening local manufacturing. I'm glad that there's this study. I've been waiting for this study for a very long time. I know there was a time you mentioned it was going to be launched. We are still waiting for the PS to give a green light so that we can see it. But the fact that over 222 products have been identified as products that we can produce sustainably within the country is great. The next question that we are not going to answer for now is, are we ready to buy them as government? Because then sustainability must come into place. But I don't want to answer that question because the industry is sitting here. And you're talking about all the things you've done. Msema kweli yako hapa. So I would like to really shift to Beena. And Beena, you've had all these great things that ministry is saying. I don't want to say Dr. Njuguna because he's speaking for ministry. And we understand that, yes, this is a journey. But from an FKPM perspective, manufacturing of HPTs is highly an intensive and resource-intensive venture. And we understand that doing this, you need a lot of government support, yes, right? What are some of these key policies that, as FKPM, you are currently advocating for? And what has been the experience walking this journey with the ministry?
Okay, thank you, John Paul, for that question. I will support Dr. Njuguna. The Directorate has done quite a lot of work. I have to say, honestly, when they started, we did not have a lot of faith in them because we've seen this happening before. Everybody keeps asking for data, we give data, and we never know where it goes. Or you'll start a process, it reaches halfway, and then we never know what happens. But at least we have some faith in them because they came, they spent a good amount of time in the industry. We talked, it was a heart-to-heart discussion. Everything was open, everything was transparent. We told them all the problems we are facing, we told them all the challenges. They actually took in everything that we told them. And industry cannot work alone. We have tried, it doesn't work. We need the support of the government. We need as much support as we can get from everybody, all the policy makers. So we are really happy this happened. We're really happy that now there's a report. And we're really looking forward to see the findings and now what will happen. Other policy changes that we have tried over time, of course, a lot of them have to do with taxations. I can start with one recent one, which we have just recently submitted our position papers, FKPM, to the Parliament. There is an eco-levy that is being introduced on plastic packaging materials. And as everyone knows here, all products generally locally manufactured are packed in blisters. Blisters are all plastic, whether it's PVC, PVDC. So basically, the eco-levy will touch all of us. And an eco-levy is an additional tax. Again, that means an additional cost. These will increase the cost of products by 4 to 5%. Now, we already have enough problems in the country. We already have enough things we are paying for. This is not fair to do this to the pharmaceutical manufacturers because this increases the cost of the product by at least 4 to 5%. Now you can imagine the impact of the cost to the actual patient because you don't know how many hands it has gone through. You see, a 4 to 5% increase is quite high if you look at it because all the products are impacted. So we told them, why should you have this in place right now? Actually, you should be supporting people who are using them. And we're actually even trying, because a lot of our packaging materials are imported from outside. We're actually even trying to see, can they be manufactured locally? So that it's a new industry we'll be creating. The demand is already there, because now we can no longer make bulk medicines in Kenya. So the way to go is blister medicines. Blisters will, 3/4 of them use plastic. So the eco-levy is not an advantage to us. Second is we're trying to tell our regulator, you should stop registration of products if they're being manufactured locally and we have sufficient capacity to actually meet the demand. Why register more and more and more products, pump the market with more cheaper generics when they're actually being manufactured by the local industry? Because what is also happening, some of the products are so cheap from outside, they don't match the cost we have, and then you end up finding local manufacturers actually stop making that product because it's not financially, it doesn't make sense financially. And it's happened. A lot of legacy products are now being removed from the markets as local manufacturers now concentrate on the new products. Because new products, there is less competition. And they're expensive. So we are trying to make a cheaper generic. But the old ones, we can't compete because the cost of production in Kenya, looking at all the taxes, all the new regulations, it's extremely expensive. So however much we try, the cost of production itself is very high, even without looking at the profit. So what we're trying to say is that we need support to bring down these taxations. We need to make the cost of production as cheap as possible so that now the products are actually affordable and as well as accessible to patients. That was about registration. We were also trying to get importation reduced if 3 or more companies in the country can make that product and they can again meet the demand. So why import that product from outside? You need to increase the demand, you know. If the demand is increased, production will go high, and of course the cost then comes down because all the risks and all the costs are like it's divided everywhere. So the total cost of production comes down, and more importantly, we are creating employment opportunities for Kenyans. Because more demand means more requirements in an industry. Industries will actually expand because now the requirement is maybe double of what they're doing currently. So even Cosmos might want to put up another plant. Putting up another plant means an entire new team. These are all Kenyans we're employing. So it's an advantage to all of us. Another thing is, it's also part of the 222 products. We're also trying to get KEMSA. Every product that is manufactured locally and it's in the Kenya Essential Medicine list should actually be procured locally. They should not be tendering it outside. And I know currently there is a lot happening in terms of the preferential procurement. Local industries are being given a chance. But again, it should be something that is now a normal routine. We should just make it it should be part of the KEMSA tender procedure. There is more, like imported cartons have an excise duty of 35%. When we import infrastructure, like when a company wants to upgrade their systems, we all know that we need clean rooms. You bring clean room panels, you bring anything. Basically, any infrastructure you import has a VAT of 16%. Now that VAT is going to be, at the end of the day, the cost of the VAT will go to the product. Again, the cost of production goes high. So what we are trying to say, these products should not be charged VAT because they're for the upgrade of a company. Upgrade happens when people now want to improve their GMP standards. Improving GMP standards makes the product, like you now trust the quality of that product. So the government should actually support, so that as long as we can prove that this is for the upgrade of a factory, it should, actually I should say it should be zero rated VAT, correct? And the last one, there are so many, I just selected few. Locally produced medicines should be exempt. Actually, they should have zero rate VAT, so that whatever has been incurred in the cost of production, everything, we can claim all that amount back. If we can claim that money back, again, the cost of production goes down. If we can't claim it back, the cost is put in the cost of the product. So basically, this is a lot that is currently happening with the FKPM leadership. It's more than what was there before, I know, because currently and if you can even look at the new requirements, like right now we have a new requirement for bioequivalence. I can't say it's new, it was just not mandatory. But now it is actually mandatory for local manufacturers to do bioequivalence for their products. Bioequivalence is an extremely expensive study to do. And we are currently working with PPB to see how we can transition. It cannot be something that is done overnight because then the manufacturers will incur a lot of cost. So it should be a step-by-step process. And what we are telling them, let us start slowly. Let us start with the new products because we have less information about them. The legacy products have been there for long. We know how they have done in the market. We have all the reports. But let us look at the new products. Again, we don't have the facilities in Kenya to do a bioequivalence study. We are taking all that money to India. It's not, I mean, it doesn't make sense because you're giving the money to a country, they're the ones employing people, they have all the expertise, so where are we? And we cannot say as a country, we cannot do a bioequivalence study. It's not acceptable because bioequivalence is part of, as a pharmacist, you know what bioequivalence is. You just need to now specialize on what is actually required to do the study report, to do all these analyses. And we were also discussing, maybe these skills or this analysis is actually available in the country, just in different areas. So we need to bring everybody together and decide if it is any clinical studies to be done. We have hospitals. Hospitals can help. You have institutions like KEMRI. You have NQCL, you have MEDS, you have all these people. Let us bring them together and do this as a team, rather than just being FKPM and PPB. So these are some of the many discussions that are ongoing. I think I'll end there.
Thank you so much. Maybe a round of applause. I think when you look at our local industries tend to be doing a lot of work. And without that support, I hope we are not, without the necessary support from government and other stakeholders, they'll not be able to thrive. I was surprised, I think a week or two ago, when the deputy chair or the vice chair of the health committee put a statement. I don't know whether you followed. He was speaking on media and indicated that if we cannot align to the taxation, we go set up in Uganda and import tax-free. Did you hear that? Did we hear that? How many had that? You see, I think those kind of statements are not great because the continent, in fact, the world is changing. And the world is changing pretty fast. And if we do not put our house in order, we will do a catch-up game. And it will not be very easy. The Rwandas of this world are technically taking leadership from the top. We expect the presidency to also take leadership, and those who work under him, like the parliamentary committees, should be able to champion and support this work. And that transitions me, because the president himself mentioned that by 2026, 50% of all the essential products that we will be consuming in our country must be procured locally. And I think that's a huge presidential directive and a clarion call for us to do this. So when I hear such statements come out, like the one that came from my good friend from Parliament, I get scared. I was talking to Vimal about it, and we were laughing about it, saying we need to do more work. The president went to United States, Milka. And you represent USAID. And I know he came up and said all the goodies. I know we are not going to war, so I'm not going to talk about the machineries of war that he came up with. But looking at the concept, and I know the US must also have called him because there is some busyness that they would like to see, and pharmaceutical is a big one. Just speak to us and talk to us about that journey to the US in respect to local manufacturing, and how that visit would be able to support local manufacturing in Kenya. Of course, that we're going to give limelight to that visit, but look at it broadly, and especially from a USAID perspective in support of local manufacturing. Take it up.
Thank you so much, John Paul, and also thank you, PSK, for hosting us today, for hosting us this week. I'm speaking on behalf of USAID. I think as USG, or actually USAID, we are committed to Africa sourcing. I think it goes beyond understanding that most of the conditions that we are interested in are predominantly here in the continent. If we talk about malaria, 96% of the cases are actually here in Africa. So we are a development partner. We support the government of Kenya. We work closely with Dr. Njuguna and team. I think we have been very key partner with them as they've gone through what he has mentioned. We have actually been supporting them on most of those processes, but specifically on local manufacturing, I think for us, we learned from COVID, and I think the objective that we have is to improve the responsiveness and the resilience of our supply chain. And I mean, we are really committed to sourcing from the continent. As a development partner, I'm sure you know that USAID procures a lot of these commodities, especially for HIV, malaria, and others. And specifically for malaria, I think this commitment, we are really demonstrating in numbers. In 2021, we were only buying 3% of our products from the continent. That has moved to 10% as of last year. And that is all the products that we are sourcing, like from nets to ACTs, or everything that we are sourcing. And that's about $18 million of goods that we are buying from the continent. We are hoping that this can actually go to actually, we can double that by 2030. And how do we double that? Then we really need to look at what are the challenges in the ecosystem here. And if you look at most of the companies that are manufacturing some of the products that we are already procuring, they are actually here in East Africa, predominantly actually here in Kenya. So we are really happy for the work that FKPM is doing, really great work, because our quality marker for us to be able to procure is actually WHO pre-qualification. Without WHO pre-qualification, we are really not able to procure. And most of the companies that FKM you represent are actually have made that mark. So looking back to what we have done in the last 2 years on local manufacturing, one of the challenges that has been mentioned is actually supporting improvement in regulatory standards. I think we all know, as you are part of the industry, that Kenya is on this journey of meeting Maturity Level 3, ML3 standards for our pharmacy and poisons board. We have worked with them, we've been supporting them in the last 2 years, looking at what was identified by WHO as the challenges, and we are really hopeful that by the end of this year, Kenya will actually be an ML3 country. That would be like the 7th country in Africa to meet that standard. So we've really been working with them. Our partners are here that are supporting that process. We have PQM Plus supported by USP, United States Pharmaceuticals, and then we have MSH through another program called MTAPS supporting that process. And we recently have our private sector engagement program that is implemented by Population Services Kenya, supporting the department on the market intelligence for the same. So that's one of our key inputs that we have. And we know for sure if Kenya can meet that majority level 3 standards, the challenges that the industry here is having, or the challenges that you have as a professionals dispensing the medications that are out there, will be reduced, because for sure, if Kenya gets into that stringent regulatory requirement, then we are onwards. It will even also attract investment. The other area that we are working in is access to financing. We know, as you are mentioning, actually improving infrastructure, attracting the talents that is needed. The local industry requires more investment. We are really looking at how to improve access to investment for our local industry. So far, we have supported 2 companies to improve their manufacturing standards. One of them is Revito Healthcare, that's based here in Kilifi, and we are looking at another company in Nairobi, Dawa Limited, also looking at how we can support them to actually expand their manufacturing so that they can be able to produce more of these essential products. The other one area that we are also looking at is looking at procurement, looking at procurement policy, legislation framework to support the industry. I think, as John Paul mentioned, the president did actually mention that by 2026, 50% of essential products will be procured, will be made locally. But what we have noted over the last 1 year is actually the policy framework to be able to implement that is still lacking. And we've been working with the government through the department to actually put in place the mechanisms that will ensure that by 2026, Kenya can actually buy most of the products from here locally, and we are really working closely with the department. The other one is also looking at, if you manufacture in Kenya, you have to think about access to market. So we are also looking at what we are doing on a regional platform. Our office here is Kenya and East Africa, but we are also looking at access to regional markets within Africa. And one of the work we are looking at is harmonization, cross-border trade agreements. I think you know the work that the Africa CDC or Africa Union is working on harmonization, setting up the Africa Medicines Agency. USAID has been a key partner in that process. We have helped them to come up with the information that they need to set up that structure. We are working very closely with other partners that are engaged in that process. That is WHO is one of them, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the other one that we are working with. And finally, we are also looking at talent and the human resources that are needed for this process. We've been working closely with the Ministry of Health to think about it, because if you think about what is required, for sure, if Kenya gets maturity level 3, she has mentioned the need for bioequivalent studies, bioavailability. We've been thinking about that as well and saying what will be needed for Kenya to actually be able to meet these standards that are coming. Because again, as we improve the policy environment, we also want the industry to come in tandem. And I think one of the comments that had come from the assessments we have done was, the challenges that are there in HRH. And I think we are working very closely with the industry on that note, looking at the training capacity within our universities, and how can we actually train and have the right cadres to be able to actually meet the requirements that are coming up, so that Kenya, the local manufacturing industry, can actually be ready for what is coming up, as Kenya is now becoming a stringent regulatory environment. I think that's in summary what we are doing. We continuing to learn as we move along, but for real, we are here, we are a development agency, and we are supporting the government of Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. Several things that she's mentioned, right from WHO PQ process, improving the regulatory systems, procurement policies, and human resources. And I want to throw this back, and I know you did not prepare for this. When we support the regulatory systems in Africa, we would want NRAs, National Regulatory Authorities, to acquire a higher maturity level. And I'm glad that this journey for Kenya has been moving in the right direction. By end of the year, we should be able to get there. ML3 would mean that this is a mature entity. And some, like SAPRA, is even getting to ML4 for medicines. WHO PQ process, as a prerequisite to procurement, is a deterrent factor to local manufacturing, and has been a big problem for the industry. As we are thinking about WHO PQ, when it was set up, it was meant to address the problems of lower middle income countries. What do you think needs to be done in this space when we have maturing, or let me say, we have AMA, the African Medicines Agency, we have regulators achieving a higher maturity level, and WHO PQ? How do you think these two should be able to play?
Thank you again, John Paul. I think for sure, from our own understanding, and even from the work that your organization is doing, for local manufacturers to go through the WHO PQ process, it's actually an expensive journey. It's also a long process. So we understand that for the past, they have really not seen the incentive to go through that process. And that's why, together with the other partners, I'm talking about WHO, I'm talking about Global Fund, I'm talking about the wider USD, that's PEFA, which leads on our HIV mandate. We've also been thinking about what other ways can we support, especially the manufacturers in Africa. And I think the Global Fund, for instance, are now working on this, what they are calling the expert review process, where they have identified some essential products and they have invited manufacturers in Africa to apply to go through that expert review process, which is actually a very shorter process than WHO pre-qualification. And I think also, as you said, we have already said, if a company has gone through the expert review process, through the Global Fund process, we should be able to accept that quality standard. And I think there's a lot of progress that's happened globally. I think you said is sitting in that WHO conversation. And I think as they are going through this process of making countries go through these majority levels, I think there's understanding that in the long run, if a country meets what they are calling the stringent regulatory requirements, then whatever is manufactured in that country, if it has met what WHO expects, then should be accepted in the market. And I think we are following through that conversation. And I think we are all aligned that for sure, if the Global Fund is using this expert review process, even as the US said, we will accept that. So for sure, that's already happening. We know we have supported that process. There are a few companies here in Kenya that have applied through the expert review process beginning last year. And if they go through that process, for sure, we should be able to support that. So we are looking at different ways, but I know it's still a challenge. And I will invite technical partners I represented here, including your organization, to continue supporting the industry, because this WHO pre-qualification process is a challenge for some of them, but if they are supported, they should be able to make progress. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a beautiful news to hear, especially when you're in the space of local industry, to know that there will be alternative processes, especially to be able to support the industry to access the financing, especially from big procurement agencies, the USAIDs, the Gavis, the PEPFARs, of like those big procurers should be able to access our product. Dr. Njuguna, I want to come back to you. We've heard a lot about preferential procurement as a key agenda and as a key item that needs to be done to support the local industry. You've also done a study. And we would like to get deep into this study a little. I know you've not officially released it. But are you able to speak to us about the opportunities and challenges that you've been able to observe in this study? And if there are things around preferential procurement, also elaborate on them. And what initiatives the Ministry of Health would want to undertake to support the local manufacturing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, John Paul. Allow me to say this. The reason why we went out to meet the industry leaders was because one of the main things was because we wanted to understand their challenges. Because previously we could get challenges through the internet, you know, we could probably research what are challenges affecting the manufacturers. But we chose not to go that way. We chose to meet the manufacturers themselves. And I think Beena has just actually confirmed that, yes, we had a heart-to-heart talk with all the manufacturers in pharma. And we are going to do the same with the manufacturers in other health products. Now, we were able to pick challenges, about 12 main challenges that are affecting manufacturers in this country. And we were able to actually even weigh the challenges, right from those that really hurt, right, to those that probably do not hurt as much but still are challenges. The reason why we were able to weigh those challenges is because as DHPT, we want to start looking at those interventions that are going to actually give the most successes in terms of turning around those challenges. Actually, one of the things we believe is that we can be able to turn around challenges to opportunities. And therefore, I will talk about the challenges that we found out and the opportunities that we see towards each challenge. The biggest challenge that we found out, number one, and just like Beena came about with the main point, is taxation. You know, unfavorable tax regimes are one of the main issues that are affecting the manufacturer right now. If you look at the VAT Act of 2013, that is paragraph 140, chapter 84 and 85, basically, 84 and 85 talk about tax exemption for equipment. But like Beena said, I mean, for the clean rooms and ETC, the infrastructural part is not mentioned. And therefore, manufacturers have been asking us, when I bring that equipment that has a tax exemption to an industry, but which requires, the pharmaceutical grade panels and the floors, like, we all import all those things. Then why is it that those pharmaceutical grade panels then are also not tax exempt? Because you cannot manufacture the manufacturing industry is not just brick and mortar. So one of those things that we were able to understand is that, yes, the infrastructural components of our industry are still as taxed. They do not have tax exemptions. Again, we were able to even look at the East African Community Customs Management Act, the IACMA. And also in the IACMA, we do not have exemptions. The East African community has not come up with exemptions, again, for the infrastructural products that we still, again, import. So the matter of taxation is a huge thing, which we need to look at. The second issue was overheads, expensive overheads, especially energy, electricity. Electricity is quite expensive. If you look at the bills, the electricity bills that manufacturers pay, they are humongous. At times we even wonder, how are you able to pay? So again, that came into light. And then the third one, and I think I'm happy that Milka, you've talked about the third one, is access to credit. Because yes, there is access to credit, but credit is so expensive. If you look at the time that it takes for a manufacturer to recoup their money, it takes a long time. And therefore, with expensive credit, then they will be unable to actually recoup, because they will actually not be able to make that interest in time. So having talked about those three, I said we have about 12, I'll talk about others. The greatest opportunity that we have, and I think it is important that I mention it here, is that when we come together, we can discuss about these opportunities. The next time, and I think, JP, you put it very well, you're yearning to see that report. That report shall be disseminated by the PS himself. I think it's going to be now the biggest PS roundtable meeting that we've had since we had the first one in August. Now, in this meeting, we are going to have KRA in that meeting. We are going to have the Ministry of Energy in that meeting. We are going to have the Ministry of Trade in that meeting. The reason why we are doing this is we want to have every sector represented, because you can only approach these challenges in a multi-sectoral approach. We cannot do it as Ministry of Health alone. Now, one of the things that we are happy about, and this is the reason why we think the Division of Quality Assurance and Market Shaping exists, the reason why DHPT exists, one of the reasons is we are able to spearhead the bringing of everyone together. Again, we talked about the preferential procurement list. This is a list that is gazetted by the Ministry of Trade, right? But it comes from the different ministries who have such a list, Ministry of Health included. So the greatest opportunity we shall have is to bring everyone together. In fact, I think PS actually even indicated to KRA that they need to even give a presentation during that day. So these are the things that are going to change this country. These are the things that are going to change this sector when we bring everyone together. And like Beena said, yes, initiatives have come before. People have worked in isolation, and nothing has worked. So this is a new initiative that we are going to have. So huge, and I think at that point, again, you can clap. But again, we are going to go to the second one. Again, we do not have a local manufacturing policy as we speak. So the review of the KNPP 2012 into an HPT policy that focuses on local content is again going to be a big thing, right? So if we have that policy, we are going to be able now to have the strategies that will accompany the policy and that will ensure that the policy is actually adhered to. And again, now, like what we have said, JP, the preferential procurement list. We are, again, we are going to sit together with the likes of KEMSA, because as we speak, we were able to come up with the Kenya Essential Medicines list. Now, KEMSA does not buy anything outside KEML. So the same way, we are going now to present the preferential procurement list from MITI, that is from MOH, but gazetted through MITI. And again, we'll get to a point where the 222 products will not be procured from imports. They will only be procured from what is produced. And I think this is the way we are going to change the scene. So again, if we are able to do that with KEMSA, we might even be able to convince meds to actually also do the same and promote Buy Kenya and Build Kenya. In fact, one of the persons that we have within this large multi-sectoral approach is Keproba. Now, Keproba advocates for Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. So again, we have brought in Keproba on board. And I think we also have PS Kenya, who are very good at promoting the likes of the condoms and the aqua tubs. Again, Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. So I think this is the way that we are going to be able to build this sector. Again, my point is the greatest opportunity is when we come together. I think we are going to be able to improve this sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of things happening, right? And as we come here, a lot of the times people want also to know, so what is in it for me, right? So a lot of policy work, a lot of support from our development partners also fall there. Beena, I would really want to understand, because what is in it for them may not have come out from a human resource, human capital development space. And we've seen all these rapid changes that are happening in our space, especially the Kenyan space, which of course, we all know that Kenya is one of those that exports a lot of our human resource outside there for a lot of support. I know people in the World Bank, people in SEPI who are Kenyan pharmacists working in those spaces and influencing the global policies. I would really want to ask for you to try and explain to us from your own experience, what are some of the current human resource challenges from a skills and expertise perspective that you are facing as industry players, and then what would be your recommendations to pharmacists to better prepare for this current and future manufacturing needs? We see where we want to go. We see where the continent wants to go. You know the gaps that are currently existing. What are those current gaps, and how do we prepare the human capital for that future that we want?
So I'll just present one slide. I just wanted to show something. Okay. Now, this is just like a layout of different areas in a manufacturing sector. And I know everybody in this room, being a pharmacist, has at one point or another gone through a manufacturing industry, whether it is through employment, or it was through internship, or whether it was through attachment. Now, I'll just go through each of them one by one in short. When we look at research and development, all the companies in Kenya are generic manufacturers. We don't have innovators in Kenya, okay? So what we do is we pick the innovator product and then make a generic out of it. Now, making a generic product also is not an easy task. It's not a matter of just you looking at the formulation, making a tablet, and then you're done. It's a lot of work. And currently, there is a lot of requirements, even in research and development, because there's a concept they're bringing in, quality by design. So the quality does not start from production. Quality starts right from R&D. The moment you're doing your research and development, you develop a product with quality. So everything you do is in terms of what GMP requires, what is required in terms of quality. So that means there is more testing. That is what I mean. These other departments come in with interest, but I can tell you that it's not usually an interest for many pharmacists. In fact, some of them will just take up the role because maybe they don't have an option at that time, or they just want to step into the industry. But again, as I said, industry is very different. You can only enter and become an expert in the industry if you have the interest. If you're a person who is a clinical person to deal with patients, please don't do industry. It is very boring for such a person. Because there's a lot of studies, there is a lot of documentation, you'll actually forget your clinical knowledge. So I am in that stage where my clinical knowledge is very low, but I've focused more on industry. QC, a very technical department. Again, we don't have pharmacists who can take this department. It's an extremely technical area. You have to know all your guidelines, you have to know all your chemistry, and from my experience, I know very few pharmacists are very good in chemistry. It's our weakness. So this area, again, we don't have the skill set. Supply chain, I don't know if currently pharmacists are looking into supply chain, but it has never been much of an interest to many. Because we need people in procurement, we need people in logistics, and we need pharmacists. The reason being, they will understand the processes, they'll understand the products, and they'll understand the risk of something going wrong. If, for example, during logistics, there is no temperature control, there is no environmental control, are we buying from a wrong API vendor? If there is a vendor change, are we meeting the requirements? It's very easy when it's a pharmacist doing that role compared to any other person. It's actually explaining these things to a non-pharmacist or somebody who is not from a health background is like hitting a wall. You are not going to come to any conclusion. He will put his point across, you are trying to explain to him, you are not making sense. For him, he's just doing his job. Sales and marketing, I am not sure if other companies have, but I have not seen pharmacists in this area. So the whole point of all this is, if we have to move ahead, and this is now for the pharmacists, we need people in all these areas. Let us start specializing in these areas so that when we have technical people taking charge of this company, actually let me tell you, following the guidelines, doing all these new tests is not going to be hard. But we are currently giving a chance to other people with different qualifications, and they're becoming experts in these areas. So why not pharmacists? So yes, these are the skill gaps, and on top of it, we have also experienced where a lot of pharmacists come in, but they don't have a lot of hands-on experience. Even a simple thing as testing in QC, doing all those laboratory tests, we have to see that, because when they even go around for internship, we ask the departments that how are the students, how are the students doing? And they tell you that pharmacists come to the department, they sit, they don't even want to do the pipetting, they don't want to do the testing because they feel that is not their role. You see, when they'll go to an industry, they will not do that work. So we need people to understand you cannot even do a release of a product if you have no idea what QC does. Correct? You have to know. Actually, a person who is doing the release of a product has to know everything that has happened in that company. You have to know all the changes. You have to know anything new, any new specifications. You have to be involved in everything. So we cannot say that we only want to do product release or we only want to do regulatory and we don't want to do production or QC or even supply chain. We face problems like in procurement when we try to explain to them you cannot change an API vendor left, right, and center. There is a process and there is an impact of change to a product. But for him, he tells you, this vendor does not have the material, so do you want me to just sit? But there has to be a way, like you don't change today, it is this one, tomorrow it's another one. So we need people who understand. It is a pharmacist who will understand if I change the vendor, it will have an impact on dissolution of the product. If it affects dissolution of the product, it affects the therapeutic dose of that product. So we need people who understand that. Second is the theoretical knowledge versus practical knowledge. When students come for attachment and internships, please take advantage. You tell your friends, take advantage of the industry experience you're getting. You might not get a chance again. So the 2 months that you go there should actually be the best 2 months of your life in the industry. As much as you can, learn. Because there you're going as a student, you have no responsibility. It is left on you to do that job. When you get the job, actually it's your responsibility. So if something goes wrong, it's on you. Here, nobody is going to blame you for anything. So we're trying to say, let us learn, let us get those skills from the industry, and tomorrow let us strategically place pharmacists in any of these areas. So we will be creating employment, and it's not good when we don't want to do it in a way that is mandatory. We want pharmacists to do it by choice. Let it be their choice that industry is also an area that is interesting for them and they want to be placed there.
If I were the president of PSK and I had the power, I would have just considered this conference closed after this. But this is how big this is. Please note that the entire continent is currently putting measures on local production across the entire spectrum of health products and technologies. And one of the key statements you'll hear across board is that we lack the human resource with the expertise to do this. we have started seeing a lot of people getting into regulatory affairs. But when you look at research and development, and when you look at production, those are still huge gaps, as well as QA and QC. It is important that we have a clarion call for PSK as the body that represents the pharmacist, working with training institutions and other allied training organizations to make sure that we prepare for this. Remember, this knowledge will sit at the industry level. This knowledge will be required at the regulator level. And as we speak right now, the gap is huge. And we need to start preparing. And it is not only for Kenya. It is for the entire continent and across the globe. So let's look at this and see the opportunities that this has. Thank you so much. I think another round of applause. Someone will need to give me I want to open it up for the next 10 minutes for any questions from the floor.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Isaac Mulwa. I'm a supply chain pharmacist, maybe among the few pharmacists who are in the supply chain space. I have actually two questions. And I've had very good discussion around the policy shaping that is taking place on the local manufacturing. But I wanted to hear from the Minister of Health, the government, from Dr. Stephen Njuguna. Sometimes there could be good discussion, but if they're not anchored into some sort of legal framework, you may not have a good basis of justification and point of reference. So I know there is the KDA Bill 2022 that is one of maybe touted bill that is trying to spearhead and re-emphasize the local manufacturing. So I would like to hear from you, what are the efforts from the ministry to entrench and to cement those discussions that we have had? When you say that KEMSA should be compelled to buy from the essential medicine list, is it provided in that law? And what is the ministry doing to ensure that the bill, as it is being legislated, those good discussions, they find themselves in that bill? Then lastly, my question goes to the head of regulatory affairs, Cosmos. Yes, we are discussing about the local manufacturing of essentially the finished product, but I know if we can also consider, the API production locally, it could also be a springboard to that direction. So I would also want to hear from you, is there any activity or effort towards local production of API in the country? Thank you.
I think we had a second, and then we go like this. I'll do the 5, there are 3 more, and then we'll answer them. Go ahead,
Okay.
David.
Thank you so much for the wonderful discussions. Odhiambo David is my name. I have 2 questions. One is to Dr. Njuguna and another one is to Dr. Beena Mahida. And the first question with regards to the government efforts to promote local manufacturing. I love the fact that you've engaged with the local industry to understand what their pain points are, what the opportunities, and what interventions could come from the government. But we also understand that with the current manufacturers, there's also opportunity to incentivize other manufacturers, including the players who are working in the market at the moment. And I pointed this from the point that I serve within the CAPI board, and from an industry, Kenya Association of Pharmaceutical Industry. We never had these engagements, and probably some of our players would be considering coming into the market, but they don't know how are we incentivizing them to come and invest in the country. So what opportunities do you have to engage with players to ensure that we're opening the market for such kind of investment where necessary, but also the most importantly to understand what are their challenges and what are the concerns. That is number 1. With regards to the next question that I have is to Dr. Beena Mahida. The key is, I do some work in terms of training, and we understand these skill gaps do exist. I'm a case example by the virtue that when I graduated from the university, I didn't know what regulatory affairs entailed, but somebody took a chance and guided and mentored me along that journey. And by the virtue of that, through African Pharmaceutical Network, we've been doing a lot of work training people, engaging with professionals who are practicing to equip people with the skills. But there's still a gap in the sense that we don't have that practical opportunity where we could collaborate. And my proposal is, what opportunities do we have through you in Cosmos, but also through FKPM, that we can have practicum engagement where the people who are learning can actually have practical insights and experiences? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diambo. I'm honored to be a member of the board of the APN, so I declare conflict of interest there. But thank you so much. I think, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like I said, my name is Salim Otieno. I work in Turkana County. For this session, I'll ask questions because I'm not in manufacturing. The first one is, actually, there's a paper by WHO. It stated that 18.7% of pharmaceutical product in the market are either substandard or they are falsified or counterfeit. But I don't know about our situation in Kenya. So maybe our colleague in the Regulatory Affairs or PPB could tell us what is the situation, how much is Kenya contributing to the global poor quality or substandard pharmaceutical products, given that from where I sit, quality is something that is very, very important for our patient care. Two, you also mentioned that currently there are no bioequivalent studies being done, but from the flip side of it, because as we are in clinical space, my interest will be more about therapeutic equivalence. Because sometimes we get cases whereby patients who are being managed from the downstreams, but they come to the higher level of care. So could it be that perhaps even it was a drug quality issues? Because we say a drug could also be a cause of disease. And remember, if currently we are not doing these studies, remember there are even other costs. We have cost of hospital stay, we have cost of also specialized care, and you also have opportunity cost for the particular person not able to go to work, and it also the cost of productivity of the country. So could you give us insight in terms of when are we taking this bioequivalence as an agency? Because from where we sit, we think it is very, very important because it will affect the therapeutic equivalence which we desire in the clinical space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really good questions there. I think I still have two more. Okay, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dr. James Uruyungu. I'm a humanitarian and public health supply chain specialist, and I know I've interacted with quite a number of you. Thank you very much for the presentation, quite good. My question, I have two questions. And because we've spoken so much about policy, I will go down to technical. First question goes to Dr. Beena, and my question is, I wanted us to talk more about the locally manufactured product. So my question is, have you at any one time wanted to consider what proportion of the locally produced product is actually local? We're talking about excipients, we're talking about packaging and the APIs. So that when we talk about locally manufactured product, we are actually talking of locally manufactured product. And just have an interest so that we keep moving towards that direction. My second question goes to Dr. Njuguna. Yes, so here I want us to narrow down to demand and supply, because really that's what triggers everything else. I would therefore want to know to what extent we have been able to establish the actual demand of those 220 products that you have talked about, both in the public and the private sector. And also remember, when we manufacture locally, we also have an obligation to supply our neighbors. So are we able to say this is the demand locally in both public and private sector, and the neighbors whom we have an obligation to supply? And when we have done that, then perhaps we can talk about looking at what is then the local manufacturing capacity and we therefore establish the gap so that as we talk about supporting local manufacturing, we are very clear what we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. I knew the questions from James will not be very easy. Thank you. It's really nice seeing you again, James.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Dr. Kome Muduri. I work in Meru County, and I'm a student of public health. So the other concerns I had have been asked by my colleagues. So the presenters, thank you very much for the powerful presentations. My questions will be only two and not specific to anybody. So as we are discussing all this, I would maybe like to hear our thoughts on the herbal products. Where do they fall in all this, and how do we deal with them? And then on the second point, now that UHC is seeking to shift from curative to preventive, and there are these products we are talking about, maybe can we have a mention on the range of products? Are we talking about only medicines, or we are thinking of preventive products like vaccines and others? Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I don't think there was a lady somewhere. Allow me first give it to a lady, then we'll go the first five. We'll respond to the first five. One thing I love doing is to observe gender. We did very well with the panel, right? And I'm not doing very well with the Q&A plenary. So please break the... Go ahead.
My pleasure. Good afternoon to all.
Good afternoon.
My name is Dr. Njeri. I'm the procurement pharmacist of Nela Pharmaceuticals. So mine is not really a question, but mostly a comment or a challenge to Dr. Beena. And a special mention to Dr. Njuguna as well. It's a pleasure, Dr. Now, you did mention eco-levy. Actually, it is my second time hearing eco-levy today. I don't know if you're aware that when President Ruto went to the US to go and get us goodies, one of them was that he was about to seal a very sweet deal with Coca-Cola to the tunes of billions. Last week, however, I got to hear that that deal is at risk because of the same thing, the eco-levy. Now, I was at a conundrum with that because I don't think it's a surprise to any of us, but Coca-Cola is actually one of the companies with the leading cause of plastic pollution globally. So it was a question, should we accept the deal? Yes, we should. But should we ignore the impact that plastic pollution has in our world overall? I'll leave that question to you. So the question or a challenge, Dr. is, the eco-levy, yes, might seem unfair, definitely down to the end user. It will definitely increase the cost of the product. So can we raise it as a challenge to Cosmos as well, because it's quite a trendsetter when it comes to local manufacturing, and to FKPM at large, that can we look into the packaging of our products so that we don't ignore the impact that plastic has in our country and the world, but we get to find our middle ground so that we also save our generations tomorrow. Thank you so much.
No, great. Thank you so much for those questions. Allow me ask the panelists to respond, and maybe you keep it short. I'm looking at time, and I think I'm almost being chased off the podium. We keep the responses short, and then we can do a very quick run through on the set of questions. I love this because whenever I moderate and I see more questions, I know you've had a great impact in terms of the knowledge and spark, just catalyzing that. So please, there were so many to you. So please start us off.
Okay, so thank you all for these questions. So I'll start with the first one. If we have any plan to do API manufacturing locally, currently there are no plans yet. We are still putting our house in order, at least for the finished product. But I know that there has been some discussions on the continent as a whole, to have API manufacturing sector, because again, that is a whole different new sector on its own, which has its own different regulations and everything. So my answer would be currently nothing for Kenya. Initiatives, this has been asked by David, what is the local manufacturing doing for the skills gap? So there is currently, we are doing a program with USIU. It's mostly, it's more oriented towards the production area. So what they did is that they brought in all those who are interested to learn production. It's a program that runs for 12 months, and it's a partnership between the industry and USIU. So USIU has got funding from international agencies, and they have professors who take charge of the theoretical training. And then we as the industry offer the practical training. So what happens, they have a whole schedule. So half the time they're doing the theory, and then once they've learned the theory, they come to the industry, and then they actually do it practically. Once that is done every quarter, those students are assessed, and it's actually an exam that they have to go through. So it's assessed, and we have trainers in every department who have been trained on how to train the students. They assess the students. So we've not had interest from pharmacists. Now, this was done by USIU. I am not sure if pharmacists applied or not, because again, there was no, we don't fund the students. We only give you a small stipend at least to cover for your transport. Food is provided. So I don't know if there was any particular reason why pharmacists didn't apply. Either they were not aware, or maybe they did not feel that they wanted to go for that. But again, they started with production because the interest was in terms of the operators of machines. We needed skilled operators for machines, so it started there. But industry has also, they have expressed interest that they would like a similar program for the other areas. That would be QA or QC if required, even regulatory. But we've not worked out the logistics of that. So maybe it's something that we can take up with USIU. And I don't think only USIU, even the other institutions can see if this is something which is possible. Because for us also it's a plus point, because we will train them, and then we can actually absorb the same people. Or they can get absorbed in other industries, but you know the program that they have gone through. So that is one thing that's currently happening. There was a question on bioequivalence and when it will be mandatory. So currently it is mandatory for all new submissions. If you submit a new product to PPB right now, you need a BE study, as long as it's a BCS class 2 and a BCS class 4 product. In terms of therapeutic effectiveness, so far what I can also comment, for the legacy products, as much as we were not doing bioequivalence, we cannot say that we can question the quality. And the reason is we have had other tests which we've been doing on the product. First of all, it's manufactured in a compliant WHO GMP facility. We do comparative dissolutions, and comparative dissolutions are actually done against the innovator product. So it tells you how your product can be measured against the reference product, and there is a limit. So if it doesn't pass that limit, then your product doesn't qualify. So we have many things we've been doing for the existing products, and bioequivalence was just a measure of the safety of the product, but it does not give you an entire measure of how the product will work. There was a question on APA, excipient, and PM, packaging material that is locally produced. So of course, APA, all our APAs come from outside, different countries, but much of the chunk comes from India and China. Excipients also, a lot of them are coming from outside, but there's some that we have currently started procuring locally. But again, as I said, what is more important is the standard. So the same way we qualify a vendor for an API, we also qualify a vendor for an excipient. And that means normally we need the samples. If they pass the samples as per what we require, then the vendor is qualified. Because it's not biased that it has to be outside. As long as it passes, we will qualify. Because for us, it's easier when it's local. It's somebody that even if you've run or you've had a shortage of an excipient, you just make a call and the material is here. Packaging material, we are currently we have started sourcing locally. We have companies like Chrome, we have companies like Scanem, we have companies like Modern Litho. These are the printers who do for us the product inserts. We have started procuring cartons from Ramco. So the quality cannot match that of India, but we are trying to help them, because again for them, what they had might have been working, but we need to tell them that this is not our standard, this is not what we want. So it's something that we're walking the journey together as an industry, that as we promote them, they also get more, and they also get the required expertise and the infrastructure, because now they know there is a demand. So maybe hopefully in future we will be able to buy everything locally, but currently we are actually trying. Foils, that is the PVC, PVDC is still from outside until we will actually have a manufacturer locally who can give us the same quality. Because we all know primary packaging is very critical for a product. We cannot compromise on the quality. There was some question on the herbal products. Okay, local manufacturing, I don't think we have started doing herbal products from FKPM unless there is other industries which have ventured into herbal products. There was a question on whether the industry has started looking for other options in terms of packaging and try reduce the use of plastics. It's a discussion that is currently happening because even for the industry, if you all know, there is a new guideline we have from NEMA. It's for extended producer responsibility. So it's basically introducing a circular economy where the packaging that you introduce into the country, you have to somehow get it back. So it is our responsibility as a manufacturer. So as long as you're introducing the packaging material, you have to find a way to get it back. Again, that is an added cost to us. So it's something that we can look at. But the only thing is that I am not aware of any other options for packing products which are not plastic because we've not really had any studies or anything done. But maybe it's something we can look at for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Mine are quite a mouthful, but I'll try to actually have a look at them in the shortest time possible. So I will start with Dr. Isaac. Isaac actually appreciated the good discussions that we have. His worry is where are they anchored? And this is how I'd want to answer this question. First and foremost, I think I talked about anchoring local production on the reviewed policy that actually DHPT is leading in discussions. So when you begin by ensuring that that initiatives are anchored in a national policy, that becomes the beginning of informing laws. So we need to start from somewhere. And for us, having a new HPT policy focused on local production, then now that will now determine how we are going now to look at the laws. But again, Isaac, the preferential procurement list is actually recognized by the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015. So having a preferential procurement list that is gazetted by the Ministry of Trade, that document then becomes recognized by the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015, and which KEMSA uses as its law to procure. So again, it is not all lost. Adherence for the preferential procurement list will be as easy because already it is there in the PPADA. But again, probably something that I might want to mention, maybe when we come up with a policy, we shall see the need to probably maybe amend the KEMSA Act. So these are the initiatives that actually now get to amending the Act. When it comes to the KDA bill, yes, the KDA bill actually mentions local production as a way of ensuring that we have accessible and affordable medicines. So again, once the KDA bill it goes through Parliament, as it is probably, you are informed about that, then you will see that we actually ensure that local production is mentioned in the KDA bill, okay? Then we got a question about how are we incentivizing for new players within the market. Probably one of the things that I would want to say is this. When we ensure that we are talking about the cost of energy, if you're going to reduce the cost of energy, then anyone who wants to come into the country then realizes that it will be more profitable to actually manufacture in this country. Again, secondly, we have really talked about, I think I mentioned Chapter 140, Paragraph 140 of the VAT Act 2013. If we are able to ensure, and I think Beena talked about it, if we are able to ensure that Chapter 84 and 85 now talk about construction materials for industries and ensure that they become tax exempt, then again that becomes a huge incentive for anyone who wants to come to this country. Third, I think you heard the President mention that we now want to have new land, right, gazetted as special economic zones and export processing zones for pharma only. Now, once we have these new SEZs and the EPZs for pharma, again, a huge incentive for anyone who wants to come in, because you can imagine as much as they are constructing, both imports and what they buy locally is again tax exempt. So again, the other thing that we pride ourselves in is the market intelligence. When we say 222 products, for example, will be procured locally, then anyone who wants to come in now knows what to produce and that will move. And again, when we have the Kenya Essentials Medicines list, we are telling any investor that invest in producing what is in this list, because this is what the public sector will buy. So all these together are actually incentives for anyone who wants to set a plant in Kenya, and many more. Then we had a question on the 18% substandard of falsified products. John Paul, I think I thought this seat was for the regulator, Pharmacy and Poisons Board, but probably maybe someone from the audience could actually really give that answer. I wouldn't want to speak for PPB at this juncture, since I know someone is here and would speak for PPB. My good friend, Dr. James Riongo, demand and supply, quite key. Actually, when you look at the market forces, if we don't talk about demand and supply, then we are not saying anything. In 2021, DHPT was able to come up with quantification for the public sector. We know that it was not as accurate, but in our new work plan for 2024-2025, DHPT, through the Division of Therapeutics and Management, actually we want to now have another quantification. But quantification is a difficult task. It is so difficult to know how much we are consuming, but again, more difficult to even know from the private sector. So what we shall be doing, I know we shall be trying to perfect the quantification in the public sector, but again, we are looking at how then can we look at quantification in the private sector. I remember in the PSA's roundtable meeting with the manufacturers, the chairman of KHF actually indicated that he will actually even extend a helping hand in quantification for the private sector. So I believe it's something that we shall be looking at, Dr. Riongo. But yes, it is not such an easy task, but we shall actually be looking at it. Probably one of the things that I'd ask the partners who are here, including Milka, is that quantification is an expensive exercise. So probably, I think again, we need to come together and see then how can we be able to come up with a very, very accurate quantification process. So it's something that we shall be asking for support. But yes, this can be done. Riongo, in matters export, yes. In fact, during our baseline assessment on capacities, I mean, we were so proud of manufacturers. Manufacturers are exporting to as many as 17 countries in Africa. In fact, we have countries like Nigeria who actually love products from Kenya. So again, it's something that probably, again, with manufacturers, we might want to look at how much are we exporting. That we did look at. But it's something that we need now to enhance, so that we can probably export to 54 countries in Africa. I think this is a dream that we must probably achieve during our lifetime. But yes, Kenyan products, locally manufactured, are loved within the African space. I think, Beena, that is something you can probably support me on. Yes, so 17 countries, we are exporting to 17 countries in Africa. Then we had Dr. Kome. Dr. Kome talked about herbal products. I don't want to say much on this, but we have a Directorate of Traditional and Alternative Medicines at HPT, and we have a bill in Parliament. And in the bill in Parliament, it actually talks about local production for herbal products. So probably it's something that we might extend a discussion on, especially once we push this bill and becomes into law. And then, yes, I think that was what we required from DHPT. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause for that. Thank you, team. Just in terms of the API, I just want to respond. There is some work happening on APIs. If you've heard of the APIFA, Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient for Africa, led by Franklin Keter, he's already managed to bring somebody in the country who is producing APIs for malaria. The issue of substandard, I think it's important for us to first applaud and appreciate the vigilance within PPB. they are able to do that. And of course, I know there are very few studies that have been done for Kenya specific. A lot of them happen across the continent, but we appreciate the effort that is being done, that we are able to nab the SFs as soon as they get into the market or before they circulate so much. And I also wanted to mention that I see the opportunity when James asked about how much of the local products are what proportion of locally produced product is local. I think it's an opportunity. We must also look at it as an opportunity for the entire continent, that we must start thinking about producing some of the raw materials. Why should we be importing starch? Why should we import industrial sugar? I think those are things that we should be looking at as opportunities for this continent, for this country, and championing. I'm really sorry that I'm not going to take another round of introduction of questions. I'm very sorry for that, because we are past time, our allocated time. But I would want to ask someone to pass the mic to Dr. Wycliffe Nandama, the MD of MEDS, just to say a word. And then we are going to appreciate this team, and then we close.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've already introduced me, so thank you for that. And thank you for the panelists, a very interesting discussion that you've had. And mine, I think, is just to remind ourselves, I think the earlier session that we had in the morning, I think made a very important point that we also need to still, have in mind as we try to see how to support local manufacturing. And before I get into that, let me actually say, as MEDS, we actually do support local manufacturers. We have a policy where we give preferential treatment, even when you're doing our tenders, so that we're able to support the local industry and especially the local manufacturers, because it's very clear to us the advantages that come with it. But then, having said that, I think the discussion that we had in the morning pointed us that as healthcare workers, we need to always remember that at the center we need to put the patient. So then, having said what you're saying in terms of trying to improve local manufacturing and supporting it, I think mine is more of a challenge, both to government and maybe to Cosmos, but I think more so to government. That as you're doing that, and you're even talking of 200 and something products to be sourced locally from local manufacturers, what are we doing to incentivize so that we ensure that it's still cost effective when we do that? Because we need to put the patient at the center of what we are doing. So I'm happy to hear some of the initiatives like the economic zones and the like, so that we are not eventually, by making that move, making the patient lack access to the product because it's now more costly. So I think my mind was just to say, let's not lose focus on that. The patient, they still need to access this product. So what do we do to ensure that as we are supporting, we are ensuring that the patient is able to access? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really great intervention there.
Yeah, I think you really did a good job, and we really appreciate you for taking your time and just doing this. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed the session. Even though I'm not in the industry side, I'm one of those people you said, if you don't like industry, don't come. But I will always make sure that there's a table, because we need to have an all-rounded conversation. So I was happy that this has happened, and you guys did a good job. To appreciate them, we have our Chief Executive Officer in the house, Dr. Ivy. We have some tokens for them. So she's just stepped out, but we love Dr. Micah from JPEGO. He's a supply chain specialist, appreciating the panelists for us. Let me stand. So we have Dr. Beena. Thank you so much for showing us there is so much opportunity in the industry.